This is a homage beat.
Grace and peace, grace and peace. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of I Saw the Lord. It's your boy Brandon. Here with my bro Jermel. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Those who are listening, last week we tackled concept number 23. What purpose do statues and monuments serve? And we was jokingly saying that might be a chapter most people skip over because it doesn't sound that appealing. But if you do endure and listen to it, presented a really great gospel truth that statues, we only, generally speaking, give statues to people who have done great things. God has done the greatest thing ever, thus it would only make sense that he would create a statue. It's not the universe, it's not the stars, it's not the angels, it's you. Man is the only thing to be said to be made in the image of God, and like a statue points back to whatever it's made in the image of it is of. This week is MLK weekend, I believe. And so we know that statue in Washington points back to that man and his accomplishments. Thus you are God's image bearer, his vessel that he has created to point back to him. Unfortunately, most don't even believe in God, thus most don't even reflect God and his attributes. But that was our whole purpose. Nonetheless, God did send someone who was not made in his image, but who is his very image, to do the very thing that we couldn't, and fulfilled man's purpose so that we could be saved and redeemed. But go check out that concept on SoundCloud and iTunes if you haven't already. But we are back at it with another week of I Saw the Lord with concept number 24. If last week's concept was kind of this one will definitely get your attention. Is prostitution wrong? And me and Jermel was just talking earlier. Just because it's such a sensitive topic, we want to just make sure we're handling it correctly. Usually I try to go through it and then hit you with the punchline with the answer towards the middle. But just for the sake of those who are listening, prostitution is wrong. There's no way around it. However, what we are going to attempt to do is argue that you can only come to that conclusion from a biblical framework. If you don't come from a biblical framework, you're going to have some time wrestling with that question. And we're going to explain how further. But I just wanted to throw that out just as a disclaimer that it may seem like we're arguing for prostitution. We're not. We're just looking at it objectively and just being honest with ourselves that, hey, a strong case can be made for this. And that the only way that you can say prostitution is wrong, in my opinion, is from a biblical framework. So I just wanted to throw that out for those who are listening, those who might be like, kind of turned off. Not trying to be vulgar or rude or anything like that. I'm just trying to have a real honest intellectual conversation, and hopefully you're able to see how I can take this known concept of prostitution, which is littered throughout scripture, and point it back to the gospel. But without further ado, how are you doing, my brother Jermel? How's your week been?
It was alright, man. It was pretty cool. Just got back to work after we got hit with some winter weather, but it was cool to get back. Things going a little bit better. It was cool. How about yours?
It's been good. It's getting back into the flow of things. Like you said, the new year's come and it's like already almost the January is gone. So you just see how fast time goes by. So just making the best use of time. But I've been good, been doing good. Lord's been extremely faithful for me, whether it's we spoke a little bit about earlier, just me being in class, and the Lord providing, parents providing me with the car, job is going good. So it's been really cool. Well. So just to have this tagged along with it is very good. So like I said, I just always want to make sure I show my thanks and appreciation for you, coming out and doing this with me. So I truly appreciate it. But we're going to jump right into concept number 24, is prostitution wrong? And I start off by saying, this is an extremely provocative question, but it's not a new or an uncommon one. Prostitution is called the oldest profession, and this question should cause us to reevaluate why so many people view it as taboo. I say from an ethical standpoint, one may argue that it is exploitative and demeaning. So that's one reason why someone would say prostitution is wrong. Another reason is from a legal standpoint. the U.S. government takes a firm stance against proposals to legalize prostitution because prostitution directly contributes to the modern day slave trade and is inherently shameful. Given those two reasons for declaring prostitution is wrong, do you think those are sufficient reasons to make prostitution illegal?
They can be if you just look at them and you hear those two things, because something being exploitative and demeaning in itself, you would just say that, yo, you shouldn't do that. It's inappropriate. Just those words right there, they just make it seem like something you should stay away from. And just looking at it, when you brought up it being from a legal standpoint, when you hear something about slave trade, that's something that's a black eye on where we live in our nation. So when it has any tie to that, it just seems like something you should stay away from.
Yeah.
Like if I just hear that, that's the first thing I hear about it, or I'm looking at it and I'm hearing those type of statements being made, it makes me want to stay away from that. So just if you look at it from those two viewpoints, I mean, you would automatically say like, whoa, that's not something you do.
Gotcha.
But I mean, there's more depth to it that we understand.
And so I look at those, and like you said, those are like legitimate arguments that someone can make.
Okay.
But I say, to be honest, both of those objections are laughable. I say one reason that prostitution, one reason is that prostitution is legal in parts of Nevada. So it's like, how you on one end gonna say, prostitution directly contributes to the modern day slave trade, and then within the same country, United States government, have a state that legalizes prostitution. And I understand the difference between state and federal laws, but it seems like it's a universal kind of truth that prostitution is wrong across the board, but yet we see a state within that same country who would make the statement legalize prostitution. And then the other one, when I was doing my research, where I found this philosophy professor, I won't say the person's name because I don't know if they still shared these viewpoints, that they argue that there's a big difference between a street worker controlled by a pimp and a high-end call girl who picks her own clients. I say for this person, context appears to determine if the profession is wrong. She does not support women being mistreated, but supports a woman's right to use what she has to make a living. Therefore, she says legalizing prostitution will likely make things a little better for women who have far too little options to begin with. Whether one thinks prostitution is right or wrong, the reality is it's going to continue as it always has. Therefore, legalizing it will be better because it could be regulated. And I was talking about this a couple of days ago. It's similar to marijuana, where because marijuana was illegal, there was more violent crimes associated with it because people are trafficking it and selling it illegally. So there's just the more likelihood for crime, and then even like kind of the same idea of prohibition, where you make it illegal, more crime happens. So if you make it legal, you kind of eliminate some of that criminal aspect. And not to stay too long on the topic of marijuana, but just to see the hypocrisy of it, where there's harder drugs that are legal, nicotine and alcohol, that have far worse effects. But then we look at a drug like marijuana, and again, I'm not an advocate for whatever, I'm just looking at this objectively, where we can look at a drug like marijuana and say, oh, it shouldn't be legalized. So I'm kind of just paralleling that with prostitution, where it's like, how can we, because especially in the day and age that we live in, where it's like, you cannot tell a woman what she can do with her body. And granted, I don't want to ignore the fact that some people are kidnapped and forced into this line of work, so please don't misunderstand that. But like the person from the University of Chicago said, there's a big difference between a street worker controlled by a pimp and an escort. They can pick and choose what clientele they have. Who are we to say that she is wrong? So my question to you, what are your thoughts on that professor's viewpoint?
I just really think it's interesting with that viewpoint, saying that legalizing prostitution could make things a little better for women who have few two options to begin with. It comes off like, I don't know if it comes off like a blanket statement or not, but just talking about what you said, like people being kidnapped and stuff, like sex trafficking, that's a huge thing. Like especially like where we live. And there's a lot of children that are subjected to that, and people just come up through different situations, and they turn to using their bodies for means to make ends meet and things like that. It's a lot of things that come with that, and like people's history, like being traumatized while they're young, dealing with a lot of different things, like just working with kids and things. Like you see a lot of kids going through different things, and and when you look at it, it's almost like sometimes when you look at it, it's like, oh, if you legalize it, it'll make things better because people gonna do it anyway. It's almost like we're not looking at the piece where there's still some need and some care there, like for people that may not want to be in it. But then at the same time, I see the point that she's making, that there are people that choose to be in it, and who are we to say that they can't? But then it becomes a slippery slope, because then you have people that take advantage of it just like anything else, and they're like, whoa, it's legal? Let me go pick these people up, and like I'm gonna make some money off it, like, and I'm not even trying to make a joke out of it, because people really think like that and take things and run with it for their own benefit or gain.
And so I think her point, because like she said, she wanted to make it clear that for her, prostitution is wrong depending on the context. The context you were referring to of someone being kidnapped and trafficking, I believe this person would say that is wrong. For her, prostitution is subjective. It's not a blanket wrong in every single situation. And I think most people hold that prostitution is wrong in every single situation, but if they're going to be honest, that really doesn't follow their worldview, because those women who do choose, who are not kidnapped and sold or at a very young age, those people, let's not make that legal. For someone who is of consenting age, who elects to do these things, how are we to tell them no? And I think that was the position that she was arguing. So from her perspective, prostitution is wrong depending on context. It's not an absolute yes, it's wrong. And like I said, I just looking at it objectively, I can't necessarily argue that, because like I said, we live in a society where we tell, hey, who are you, oh person, to tell a woman what she can do with her body? That's the worldview that we live in.
And that's really real, because I mean, it is hypocritical, like for people to say that it's wrong and make it illegal, because I mean, what makes prostitution, the actual act of sex, any different from like people going to strip clubs?
We gonna get there.
But like you make it, I'm sitting there
like
thinking
said,
that
we don't think we're so hypocritical with our morality. We pick and choose the things that we find as good and bad. But I'll continue on. So essentially, I'm saying, there's a very strong case that can be made for legalizing prostitution. I say, in fact, the same case that is made for legalizing homosexual marriage can be made for legalizing prostitution. Many say same-sex marriage is a civil right. One could say the same thing about sex. How is one to regulate sex between two consenting adults? If this is what justifies couples of same sex, why is it wrong for one who pays for it? And we were talking earlier, especially in the culture that we grow up, where it's just ultra misogynistic, where you are looked at as less than a man if you don't have multiple partners. And it's like, so it's encouraged for me to have multiple partners, but then it's like frowned upon if I pay for it. Like, speak on that a little bit, just because it just seems super hypocritical, where just as a man, it's like, and I can speak freely now. My wife is the only woman who I've ever been with, but I wouldn't have like willingly volunteered that, prior to be married. It's not something most people wear with a badge of honor, because it's kind of looked down upon. It's looked at as old-fashioned, that what you only, been with one woman your entire life. But it's like, so you look down upon me, but then this person who goes and pays for a prostitute, we look at them as a criminal, when it's more honorable to pay the person for what they do. And like I said, I don't mean to sound trite or crass, but it's like, so it's okay to have multiple sex partners, but if I actually pay them, then there's the problem?